Coming up today, the Fed finally cut interest rates by 25 basis points, and this is their first cut this year. And we have two more reductions happening this year, potentially October and December. There's a new Donald Trump statue with the Bitcoin logo. This is insane. We have to talk about a big event that's happening this Friday, the triple witching, which is normally green only 28% of the time within the next 5 days. iPhone is set to release their folding phone, and they announced it for 2026 now. Previously, it was for 2027, and I'm very pumped to see what this iPhone, offers and how it truly looks, honestly. I mean, as you can see, this was photoshopped, but it will look insane. With that being said, man, we have a lot to talk about. The stock market was very volatile yesterday. We do have a breakout with Apple that we're going to be talking about a little bit later, and a play that we made that can potentially make us a lot of money. With that being said, though, we did have the stock market moving very, very volatile yesterday. And honestly, we made some big moves that we have to talk about a little bit later, but we are itching up even higher, making some new highs for the S&P 500 within the pre-market levels. And honestly, man, next level for the SPY I'm watching is going to be that 665. If we can break above that once again, we could potentially get 666.5, 667.5, and that 670 level next. But to the downside, look at that 663.5, 661.5, and then all the way down to that 660 level. If we break below that again, we might potentially be a little bit lower. We're kind of low, like below it. It wasn't really breaking that level too good yesterday. We did have some decent breaks, but honestly, it fell below that sooner or later after that. And even after hours, we're kind of trying to break it, but we weren't. But then we finally broke it, and now we're making some moves to the upside. So yeah, honestly, there's a lot to talk about today. So let's get to the news and make this video a little bit shorter. But the market was wild yesterday and kind of unpredictable, but you could have made money both ways yesterday. With that being said, we did see initial big green when the FOMC started, and then it sooner or later sold off after that. And then honestly, if you look at it, it was just selling off for a whole hour. We kind of had a little bit of a break, but then around the time that Jerome came out, we had a bigger sell-off, and the sell-off continued to some lows to that 654.3. But with that being said, right after that, man, at around 255, we kind of started breaking back up, and then honestly just consolidating at around this range, not really breaking that 660 level. But as you guys can see, pre-market and after hours, we did break that 660, like I said earlier. So look at those price targets, and honestly, you could potentially make some good money today. We're going to be talking about some supports and resistances of plays on the SPY, Apple, potentially Nvidia, and Tesla. Tesla is pretty much parabolic, but we kind of just need to see a clear move when the market opens as well. So that's why I'm going to be giving you guys plays both ways. So like the markets anticipated, we did get that 25 basis point cut with additional 2 more cuts this year. Fed officials does not see inflation getting back to 2% until 2028. And Jerome indicated that the economy is slowing down overall, which isn't really too good. But with that being said, we are seeing a big shift for the Federal Reserve. As we've seen with data, the job market isn't really doing that good, and it forced them to cut overall. So honestly, man, that is kind of insane. Everyone agreed to this cut except for one, and that was Trump's appointee, Myran, and he wanted a 50 basis point cut yesterday. I think a lot of people wanted a 50 basis point cut yesterday, and honestly, it would have shocked the markets a lot. But honestly, we're kind of neutral. He didn't say anything too bad. He didn't say anything too good at the same time. But with that being said, if we look at the new Fed Watch tool, basically the next one, which is going to be October, we have an 87.7% chance of a cut. Always watch this number because this can potentially move the markets, especially if you see this go down. I think one time we seen it go down like 67%, and we've seen a decent pullback with the market. But then, as you guys know, like the dips get bought a decent amount. And we have an 80% chance of a cut in December. And then next year, talking about next year, we might have, right now we have like a 50% chance of a cut. Basically to like neutral, and a 39% chance of a cut there, and then a 45% chance of a cut here if we don't cut this month. And honestly, man, this is just the Fed Watch tool right now. You guys can screenshot this, but right now what is very much important is going to be this month, or the October and then December cuts for now for this year, to see how many cuts we could potentially get. But with that being said, man, honestly, the market did move pretty strong. Very volatile. You could have made a decent amount of money. And yeah, going to the dot plot, man, we do have a little bit more data to show. With that being said, we do have some odd ones out. Hopefully you guys can see this, but this was July dots, and this is just a difference, a major difference. And we do have one odd one out right here. But with that being said, we can see a median expectation of a 50 basis point cut in 2025. And there was one that did not want one overall. But honestly, man, we don't know who that is yet, but it might come out and might become public and we might know why. But with that being said, man, the dot plot wasn't too bad overall if you guys read up on it. But honestly, main thing is that we see at least a 50 basis point cut in 2025 overall. And if we go over to Cauchy, we can see a 67% chance of 3 rate cuts. And Cauchy has been pretty accurate recently. I'm not even going to lie. But with that being said, we do have a 67% chance of 3 rate cuts, 2 rate cuts, 26%, and then 4 rate cuts, which would be insane, is 5%. But we did have a decent spike up with the 3 cuts right after the Fed meeting. So this is looking pretty good overall, man. The market might be pumping a little bit, you know. But going back to the seasonality chart, you know, we've been looking at this all over September and even pre-September. But for the S&P 500, it doesn't really look too good for the second half of September. Just look at this. Golly, man. If we can get a big sell-off like this, that would be kind of insane. But we could potentially just move like this, kind of move neutral, and maybe have some upticks and some downticks. But honestly, man, take this with a grain of salt because the beginning of September, as you guys know, we've been hitting all-time highs every other day, which is kind of parabolic. So let's just see where September ends. But man, September, honestly, man, it's not really lining up right now, but we could potentially get the second half of September looking pretty bad, and we might see a big dip. And, you know, maybe investors might be a little bit more scared with this one. We do see a lot of dips getting bought, but everybody knows about September. And honestly, especially big money, they know about September. So if they do start seeing things sell off, they might just start taking some profit. Because the thing is, we are all-time highs, and it is a good time to take profit right now. Wait for the market to dip a little bit, get back in. But honestly, man, this is honestly kind of parabolic overall. Not even gonna lie, Nvidia kind of looks like it's bound for a reversal. This is a big upward trend right here. So look, watch that 174.3, 175, 176.5, 177.5, 178.5, and that 180 level. If you could break past that 180, look at like 181.5, 183, and 185 to the upside. If we do start breaking down more, look at 173.5 and look at 171 and then 170 flat, and then all the way down to its lows at like around 168.5. And then past that, we got 166.7 next. But we do got some bad news overall for Nvidia. But honestly, how much can Nvidia go down from this? We did get a lot of bad news when they did get their chip banned, and it did sell off a decent amount. But as you guys know, like always, people bought the dips. But we already kind of talked about this in previous videos, but this came out today with China banning Nvidia's AI chips, and companies like Alibaba, TikTok, and other ones saying that they can't buy them. This is pretty bearish overall for Nvidia, and we have been seeing Nvidia falling the past couple of days, like I said. But with that being said, once we did see the overall China ban a few months ago, we did see Nvidia selling off a decent amount, but then, you know, the dip got bought even when the chips were banned and we were going to all-time highs. So honestly, man, this is bad for Nvidia overall, but it's not too bad just because, you know, we've seen this already. You know, it's basically the same thing that we had in the past where China's just not going to buy their chips. But one level that I was watching yesterday was going to be holding above that 170. And honestly, we're way past that. We're at like 175. So honestly, man, I think this next gap up is one that I'm going to be watching. So 176 all the way up to 178.5. If we could break above this and beat these highs right here, we could potentially have room to move up even more for Nvidia. But honestly, man, triple witching on Friday doesn't really look too good for markets overall, that we're going to be talking about in a couple of seconds. But going to earnings a little bit, you know, I think so Cracker Barrel didn't really do too good for their earnings. We do have FedEx and some other ones that aren't really that big, but I think FedEx is probably the biggest one to watch after close. And then Money Hero on Friday. I don't even know who that is, but if you guys want to screenshot this, you guys can, just to have the rest of the list for the rest of this week. But there's nothing really big happening for the rest of this week. With that being said, man, another chart that may look familiar is this one. So basically when the Fed cuts at all-time highs. So the next month, it doesn't really look too good, but honestly, it's 50-50. It's a flip a coin, basically. But it's a 50% chance that we're green, a 77% chance that we're green the next 6 months, next 3 months, sorry. Next 6 months is a 72%. And then next year, which is kind of parabolic, is 100% green afterwards, which is kind of parabolic. We've been at this bull run for a while. You are hearing people talk about recession and stuff like that. So keep that in mind overall. But if we are green the next year, maybe we have a bigger pullback coming out. You can see the market's even more green. So don't really trip too much unless we just start going even more and even more. But honestly, it's pretty good. So let's yap about the triple witching for a little bit. I kind of summarize this every time. But if you guys don't know what a triple witch is, it's basically all at the same time. We have stock options, stock futures, and stock future options expiring all at the same time. And it normally happens every 3 months. But for some reason in September, it is a pretty bearish sign. History shows that the 5-day change, we're bearish 28% of the time. Next day, 32%. Same day, 40%. And then previous day, 40%. So that is today. So today, we have a 40% chance of being positive. Same day, which is going to be on Friday, 40%. And then the next day, which potentially is like Monday, I guess to say, 32%. And then the next week is going to be 28%. So please have next week on your radar in case we do start going down. Don't be surprised if this move becomes bigger to the downside. But honestly, it's not really too bad right now. But honestly, it's just news to keep on watch. For Waymo overall, man, Waymo had some good news. They announced that it's reached an agreement with San Francisco, basically airport to carry passengers. So that is pretty bullish overall for Waymo. Reddit, we did have a deal with Reddit and Google, and just AI content packed with Google, OpenAI, and Reddit did spike a decent amount yesterday. We're gonna be looking at that when we get to supports and resistance. And then, like I said at the beginning of the video, iPhone did announce their foldable phone. So basically, man, this is pretty big for Apple. I'm honestly pumped for it. But Apple has reportedly started exploring test production of its foldable iPhones in Taiwan. And that's kind of insane. It is rumored to be coming out in 2026. And for their phones, Apple targets a total of 95 million iPhone productions for the 2026 lineup overall. And honestly, this is kind of insane. I'm kind of pumped to see if they do announce it and actually release it. But honestly, man, in the past, I showed you guys the Google Fold, and it might look like the Google Fold. I'm not even gonna lie, because the Google Fold kind of looks like an iPhone, to say. But we did have a Bitcoin statue, and honestly, this probably doesn't really. Probably it might pump Bitcoin a little bit, but President Trump's golden statue holding Bitcoin just placed outside the U.S. Capitol. This is kind of insane, and this shows that even the president is bullish on Bitcoin. And it might be big. It might be big. We do have some decent moves with Bitcoin overall. We broke that 117. Let's see if we can get back up to 120. I'm waiting to see if Bitcoin can hit that 120. Then I might trade like iBit or something like that. But honestly, I do have Bitcoin on watch, not just for this statue, but for the rate cut. Because as you guys know, rate cuts, it brings down borrowing costs so people can borrow more money. So bigger companies like MSTR can borrow money to buy more Bitcoin. And then we also have, your savings account that also goes down. So you're not really making as much money per year in your savings account. So people do put their money more into like, crypto stocks. That's why stocks be pumping. And speaking of crypto, we have Ethereum up 2%, XRP up 3%. XRP is at 310. Ethereum's at 4.59. I want to see if we can hit that 5,000 level very, very soon. Maybe we can get a little pump in cryptos in general. Bitcoin's up 0.5, and we have some other tiny ones up a decent amount. Dogecoin up 5%, which is kind of insane. So those Dogecoin holders, man, you guys are probably happy today, but maybe not too happy with the pullbacks that we had recently. But it's not really too bad. We did have StubHub. They opened at 25.35. Basically just an IPO. If you guys want to look at StubHub, it's a big it's a decent company, not a big company, but it's a decent company. But getting some supports and resistance and some of the plays. So I guess since we already got crypto open, we can talk about crypto. So if you can see a continuation to the upside for crypto, you guys can trade this a decent amount. I think for XRP, I want to see if we can break the high of 4.76 and then potentially the last high and potentially getting to like 5,000 and breaking past that. Bitcoin, I want to see 120 at least before I get in. But if you guys want to trade this, you guys can do IBIT. It's an ETF that moves with Bitcoin, and then ETHA, which is an ETF that moves with Ethereum. You could also trade the other ones like MSTR, Coinbase, and Robinhood. I think Robinhood makes money on the overall exchanges and overall crypto. So that is one to watch. Boeing Boeing has been one that we've been watching for this whole week, and we have been breaking down a decent amount. And honestly, a continuation to the downside has been happening. With that being said, we are kind of consolidating in this range. So one price to look at to the downside is going to be that 214.5. If we could break below that, you could potentially get the lows of 213. And then if we break below that, you could potentially get like 210, 208, 205, and then 200. If we do start breaking up, I think the range upwards will be like 217. If we could break past 217, look at that 218, 220, 222.5, and then that 225 and 230 next. But Boeing has been breaking down a decent amount. If we make another breakdown, you can make some money. Honestly, maybe potentially both ways, but honestly, just see if it breaks up or down past these ranges and you can trade and make a decent amount of money. Next, I want to talk about is Apple. We kind of already talked about it a little bit, but with that being said, we did make another breakout. And honestly, man, this one has been bound to break out. So honestly, for today, man, we have been getting green candles at open multiple times and then kind of just breaking down throughout the day. So what you can watch for is that big green and potentially getting up to like 141.5, maybe even higher. You never know. Because sometimes, man, it'll be unexpected. You'll think the green's not going to be that big because normally it's like $1 or $2 move to the upside and then it moves down. But sometimes, I think one time I was in a play and I think I sold pretty early and it got up like $5-10 at open. And sometimes it continues for the whole day. But with that being said, I do have an overnight call option all the way down to like that 238.5. So with that being said, I might wait a little bit, but I might just sell at like 241 to 241.3 just to, actually sell it, not really have to trade for the rest of the day. With that being said, we can potentially get 241.5, 242, and then look at that 245 next. But honestly, Apple can move pretty clean and pretty strong in the short term, and I can be watching for a bigger move to the upside, but you can also watch for that bounce down, just like yesterday. If you would have sold it at that 241 level, or not, or you sold your call option, of course, but if you would have done a put option here, you'd have made a decent amount of money to all the way down to 238, and you could potentially make the same move if it goes back up to like 241.2. It tests that, but then it fails. You can play to the downside and potentially, honestly, I'd probably just sell it at 240. And honestly, just take your profits at 240. Honestly, it might go down even more, but there's no need to be greedy. That's how you lose money. But yeah, we already talked about Nvidia. Let's talk about Tesla a little bit. Tesla has been moving pretty strong. Not as strong as my internet connection right now. Oh my God. But with that being said, man, we did have another breakout with Tesla, a new high to say for the day or for the week, honestly, for a couple of months. But with that being said, we did break that past that 430. So see if we can hold this 430 level. If we can hold this 430 level, we could potentially move up to 435, 440, and then all the way up to like 449.86. That's the next key level, but look at like 445 next. But if we do start breaking down, look at that 430, we break past that, look at 428, 425.5, 423, 417.6, and 411.2. But Tesla is moving pretty strong, and it's one that you want to have on your radar right now, especially the way that it is moving. Next one is going to be Google, just because Google does have big moves. We did have a big sell-off yesterday, but we did kind of reclaim that. We fell all the way down to like 247. Could have made a decent amount of money if you bought a call option down here, especially if you were that guru that got in at 246.7. But right now we are moving up pretty strong after hours, just like every other stock is. So I really want to see where market opens. If we can continue like all stocks moving to the upside, we can potentially get even bigger highs with SPY. And honestly, a continuation to the upside today which would be kind of insane, and or it might just have a bigger sell-off. So please be careful with trading today. One that I was talking about is Lyft. And honestly, did I talk about the news with Lyft? I think we have some more news to talk about, but we did announce this play all the way down at 18.3. I think on Tuesday or something like that. The next day moved to 420. And then honestly, man, yesterday it moved pretty parabolic to like 26, but that was after hours. So if you would have had a call option, you would have had to sell it at 22 if you wanted to. But we do have more room to move to the upside. And now that we have this little gap, we have a gap to fill back up to that $26 level and potentially hitting that $30 level next. So this play is still in play. So if you guys do want to get into Lyft, there's still room to move up to at least 25 and then maybe even hitting that $30 level. So I do recommend having Lyft on your radar. And one that I did promise I would look at is Reddit. And Reddit did move pretty decent. And if you, this one is one that you could have bought penny stock or penny options on, and it could have 1000x. That's what I did yesterday. Called it out on our X. But with that being said, man, this one is one that did move pretty decent. We did have a big sell off, and then that news that we talked about earlier came out with Google, and it spiked up, but it only spiked up to the pre market, and then we sold off again, and then we spiked back up, honestly moving honestly insanely. But with that being said, before we get to some more news, I just want to say follow me on X because I post my plays early, I post news early, everything. So make sure you guys follow me on X if you guys don't want to miss out on that, especially those Reddit plays, man. You guys could have made 1000x if you guys follow me. With that being said, Meta launches 799 glasses with screen and AI integration. This is pretty big. We've been seeing a lot of people launching glasses, and I kind of want to get some low key. Like, imagine trading stocks with your Meta glasses. That would be insane. And this one's kind of incognito. It does have a little camera that people can see, but if they can make one with like that blacked out camera that you see on like cars or something, like that little sensor that AI uses, that would be a little bit better, a little bit more incognito. Just not to record people, of course. I know people do use it to record people, but it's just so you can use the glasses maybe at work or something. You could be trading stocks, so that ain't really bad. Apple and City CEO joins Trump at King Charles at a state dinner. And this is pretty big because if they do join Trump, normally the stocks pump. So maybe that's why we're getting a little pump and that foldable phone coming out. Like I said before, Cracker Barrel stocks sink as company cuts their outlook after walking back logo update and their store remodels. Nvidia stock sinks as China reportedly tells its company to avoid buying the chips overall. And a lot of bigger companies, like we've seen Alibaba and stuff like that, they're basically banned from using it. So that is kind of bad. And then, like I was saying before with Lyft, they surged 13% on Waymo robotaxi deal in Nashville. And honestly, man, I think if they're going to keep on benefiting off Waymo, you can see Lyft keep on surging. So that's why I'm saying, man, that $30 level is good, man. Basically, man, Tesla did get some scrutiny over their door handle, saying that it's a safety issue. So now they're redesigning it. This could look bad on Tesla overall, but we don't see no selling pressure, low key. The fear and greed index, we're at 57. We're still in the greed territory, which is pretty bullish for markets overall. And for the calendar, we're honestly kind of slim. We don't have too much. Today, we do have initial jobless claims an hour before market opens. This can potentially move this can potentially change, like shift where the market is moving if it doesn't really come out too good. We have a manufacturing survey, leading economic indicator, and then we have a speech on Friday, which probably not even going to be that big. So keep that in mind overall. But with that being said, man, smash the like button, subscribe if you guys are new, follow me on X so you guys don't miss out on the plays or anything like that. You'll probably get more content over there on my X account. But with that being said, man, this video is already long enough. So thank you for watching. Smash the like button, subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace out.